Welcome to TV Africa News. This is Africa Today. My name is Nahaba Kajura, but first are the headlines. Uganda Airlines bosses face criminal prosecution. NRM parliamentary losers ask party for bailout. Vote count begins in Zambia's highly contested elections. And in our sports today, Uganda cranes to have build-up games against Syria, Ethiopia ahead of FIFA World Cup qualifiers. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we start with one of our top stories. Now, President Museveni has ordered for the dissolution of the board of directors of the national carrier Uganda Airlines following an investigation that revealed widespread corruption, conclusion, and mismanagement. Now, the presidential directive is likely to spotlight the role of the saga of Uganda Airlines board chairperson Perez Ahawe, who was a junior cabinet minister from 2009 to 2011. We have more on this report.
In what sources describe as a major surgical operation, the president has ordered Works and Transport Minister General Edward Katumba Wamala to dissolve the board of directors and consider prosecuting Uganda Airlines officials he accuses of indulging in corrupt practices such as pocketing bribes and mismanaging the national carrier like personal property. The presidential directive is also likely to raise questions about the competence and integrity of Benon Kajuna, the Director of Transport at the Ministry of Works and Transport, who was the lead government representative on the Uganda Airlines board. The president has instructed General Katumba and other relevant government authorities to interdict all suspended Uganda Airlines managers and hand them over to the Inspector General of Government for possible prosecution. In the interim, the president directed that the permanent secretaries of the Ministries of Works and Transport, as well as Finance, should handle matters of Uganda Airlines until advised otherwise. A number of Uganda Airlines officials have been accused of extorting money from job applicants, bungling procurement contracts, recruiting relatives, friends and church members across the network, maintaining ghost workers on the airline's payroll, and giving jobs to unqualified pilots at the expense of the safety of passengers.
Thank you so much, our report. Now moving on in our top stories, a group of NRM flag bearers in the just concluded January 14th election have asked the party to bail them out from debts they have emanating from the polls. Now the group of 203 people from all over the country under their umbrella body NRM parliamentary flag bearers outside Parliament on Thursday held their second assembly at Chadondo. We have more on this report.
According to the National Resistance Movement flag bearers, they also seek the party support for some of their members who have filed election petitions challenging their loss in the January 14 polls. Julius Vigirwa Junjura, the National Resistance Movement flag bearer for Hanguzi East in Chikube district, said that the group is not begging but rather asking for assistance as they continue to perform their duties. The group also promised to help do an oversight role for government programs in their respective constituencies. Speaking at the same function, the National Resistance Movement Secretary General Richard Todong hailed the group for being organized and promised that the Secretariat will offer them the necessary support. Todong told the group that the idea of helping in monitoring government programs is a good for the ruling government, adding that they will be assisted. The National Resistance Movement Director for Mobilization, Rosemary Seninde, said the group has eased her mobilization work.
We hope their grievances are worked on. Now moving on in our local stories, school heads have expressed dilemma about how the institutions will run after back-to-back closures, and last month's release of national examinations results raises the possibility of two cohorts in the same class. Now classes expected to be most affected include Senior 1, Senior 5 and University first year intake. We have more on this report.
In the face of the COVID-19 threat, the government closed educational institutions in March 2020 and again on June 18, 2021, after post-first pandemic wave-phased reopening, which was due to be completed, led to increased infections among students. The second 42-day lockdown has been partially lifted, but schools remain closed alongside places of worship, bars, gyms, and concerts. With the results of primary leaving examinations and Uganda Certificate of Education examinations released last month, and that of Uganda Advanced of Certificate of Education pending, questions arise about a clogged system. The current Senior 1 and Senior 5 students had studied for 3 and 2 weeks, respectively, before President Museveni imposed the first nationwide lockdown. Schools reopened in a phased manner, and Senior 1 students studied for about a month, while their Senior 5 counterparts were due to return for third term of promotional examinations before the second lockdown was imposed.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. And Africa Today takes a quick break. We shall come back with the international news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. Moving on, in our international news, vote counting has now begun in Zambia following the successful staging of the Southern African nation's general elections. After 12 hours of voting, polling stations started closing at 6 p.m., though several hundred still in queues were being allowed to cast their ballots. We have more.
President Edgar Lungu deployed more troops in parts of the country to quell election violence in the tightly contested polls, pitting him against long-time rival Hakainde Hichilema. Lungu said election day violence had killed 2 people, including the chairman of his party in Northwestern Province. 16 candidates were vying for the top job, but the front-runners are Lungu, 64, and business tycoon Hichilema, who are facing off at the polls for the third time, and who between the two of them garnered almost 98% of the votes in the 2016 election. Addressing opposition fears of fraud, Hichilema said Zambia's next leader must be determined by the voters, not the people who count the votes. But by afternoon, the internet was partially shut down in the capital, Lusaka. Around 7 million citizens were eligible to vote for a president, legislators, and local government representatives. The winning candidate must acquire more than 50% of votes to avoid a second-round runoff. Official results are expected by Sunday.
Moving on, in our international news, Ethiopia denounced on Thursday a destructive alliance unveiled this week between rebels from war-torn Tigray and a group of Oromia, the country's largest region. Take a look at the story.
At a press conference Thursday, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's spokeswoman Bilene Seyum noted that lawmakers in May formally designated both the Oromo Liberation Army and the Tigray People's Liberation Front terrorist organizations. The Oromia group, which calls itself the Oromo Liberation Army, but which federal officials refer to as OLF Shen, went public with the purported alliance on Wednesday, telling journalists that the agreement is at a very early stage. Bilene added that the two groups have acknowledged that they are working in unison, leading towards destructive activities against the stability of the nation, and that terrorism is a general feature of both. The Ola, believed to number in the low thousands, broke off from the Oromo Liberation Front, an opposition party that spent years in exile but was allowed to return to Ethiopia after Abiy took office in 2018. Abiy's government has blamed the Ola for a number of recent massacres targeting ethnic Amaras, the country's second largest group, though the militants have denied responsibility.
Now, moving on, Sudan and the International Criminal Court signed a cooperation deal on Thursday as one step further towards ex-dictator Omar al-Bashir facing trial for genocide in the Darfur conflict. Now, Bashir, who is 77 years, has been wanted by the ICC for more than a decade over charges of genocide. Now, war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Sudanese region. We have more on this report.
The International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan, who described the Darfur Civil War as a dark chapter in Sudan's history, said plans were underway for the Hague-based International Criminal Court to open an office in Sudan to collect further evidence to build a solid case. 2 other former ADs are also wanted to face war crimes charges. The United Nations say 300,000 people were killed and 2.5 million displaced in the Darfur conflict, which erupted in the vast western region in 2003. Sudan has been led since August 2019 by a transitional civilian military administration that has vowed to bring justice to victims of crimes committed under Bashir. On Thursday, Khan told reporters in Khartoum that he was pleased to report the transitional government had signed a new memorandum of understanding with my office that includes all individuals against whom warrants of arrest have been issued by the ICC. Bashir, who ruled Sudan with an iron fist for 3 decades before being deposed amid popular protests in 2019, is behind bars in Khartoum's high-security Koba prison.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now, Chad marks 61 years of independence with a large military parade in Jamena in the presence of Mahamat Idris Deby, president of the Transitional Military Council since the death of his father, Idris Deby Itno, in April. Take a look at the story.
The Chadian army, considered as one of the leading armies in the region, demonstrated its strength by deploying a number of artillery. The heavy artillery, composed of tanks, armored vehicles, long-range guns, and other combat vehicles, were displayed during this military parade. The army also flew some 20 aircraft, including Russian-made helicopters and attack aircraft. Dressed as a 4-star general, Mahamat Idris Deby Itno was in the front row of the main gallery, surrounded by the 14 generals. In the southwestern Lake Chad region, the army has been fighting the Nigerian group Boko Haram, or its splinter branch, the Islamic State in West Africa, since 2015. Chad also participates in the anti-jihadist force of the regional organization G5 Sahel, also including Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Finally, in the northern part of the Tibesi Massif and on the border with Libya, the army is fighting rebels and gold miners.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. Now let's go for a quick break. We shall come back with the business news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. Now let's turn your attention to our business news today. Oil giant Shell agreed on Wednesday to pay $95 million to communities in southeastern Nigeria whose land was ravaged by oil spills in the 1970s, according to lawyers from both sides. We have more.
Environmental non-government organizations, including the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, have accused Shell of more than 20 years of environmental degradation and negligence in Ogoni County, a region of the Niger Delta with mangroves devastated by oil pollution. Shell was first convicted in 2010, but the company had repeatedly challenged the ruling but did not succeed. The company finally reached a settlement in the Abuja High Court with the community on Wednesday. The Angola Dutch company Shell has agreed to pay compensation to the community that has maintained that the oil spills were accused by third parties during Nigeria's 1967 to 1970 civil war, during which many pipelines and infrastructure were damaged. On Wednesday, the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People welcomed the ruling in a statement. In 2015, Shell agreed to pay $70 million in compensation to some 15,500 residents in Ogoniland and agreed to begin cleaning up an oil spill in 2008, even though the company has always claimed that artisanal sabotage of pipelines by locals was the primary cause of pollution.
Away from business, in Africa Today Health, a heat wave broke temperature records in Tunisia's capital and elsewhere in north and center of the North African country on Tuesday, according to the National Meteorological Institute. The temperature in Tunis reached 48 degrees Celsius at midday, smashing the capital's previous record high of 46.8 degrees registered in 1982.
The National Meteorological Institute of Tunisia said that the mercury hit between 9 and 15 degrees Celsius, higher than the seasonal norm in northern and central eastern parts of the country, adding that temperatures are set to fall progressively. Tuesday's highs follow a record high for the south of the country, where the temperature hit 48.5 Celsius on Sunday, according to the institute. The health ministry has advised people not to venture out during the hottest hours of the day and to drink plenty of water in a post on its Facebook page. The agriculture ministry, meanwhile, urged farmers to take measures to protect their livestock and crops. In neighboring Algeria, some 50 fires have been sparked by the heat wave since Monday evening, killing dozens of people, according to authorities.
In our sports news today, Uganda Cranes will embark on the 2022 FIFA World Cup journey next month when they face Kenya away and Mali at home. Now, the two games come as the first test for Milutins Rejovic, Elias Mitchell, who returned to the helm of coaching the Uganda Cranes at the start of this month. We have more on this report.
Prior to the aforementioned World Cup qualifiers, the Uganda Cranes coach Mitchell will have a chance to test the players against Syria and Ethiopia in a friendly games. The Serbian tactician has on Friday summoned a preliminary squad of 30 players to begin training. The team named comprises of the local best players with the exception of 3 including skipper Emmanuel Okwi, Abdul Kumara and Patrick Kadu, who are currently in the country. Federation for Uganda Football Association has made arrangements to have the teams train here up to 21st August before moving to Jordan for a training camp. Initially, the team was slated to have the camp in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, but that has since changed. While in Jordan, Uganda Cranes will face the Syrian national team twice, with the games coming on 23rd and 26th August. The team will then move to Addis Ababa, where they will face Ethiopia on 29th August before traveling to Kenya for the first qualifier match on 2nd September at Nyayo Stadium. Uganda is in Group E of the 2022 FIFA World Cup qualifiers alongside Mali, Kenya and Rwanda.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now, before we end our bulletin, let's have a recap of our top stories. Uganda Airlines bosses face criminal prosecution. NRM parliamentary losers ask party for bailout. Vote count begins in Zambia's highly contested elections. And in our sports today, Uganda Cranes to have build-up games against Syria, Ethiopia ahead of FIFA World Cup qualifiers. Thank you so much for being a loyal audience from where we started from. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We shall keep updating you. It is TV Africa, the right to know.